It was June 21st, 2011, when the governor of Kansas awarded Esther Levens, in honor of her late husband Vrem Levens, a prestigious proclamation recognizing Vrem's tireless efforts supporting Israel from before the birth of the nation in May of 1948 until his death in 1983. The house was packed, the energy was high. Here are the events as they transpired.
Our delight to welcome you today, and I'll give you a moment or two for you to find a place to sit. We have a very full house. Speaking with guests today, it was Ann Hodgson told me, "Ronnie, you made a big mistake today. You should have charged double."
That's right.
But we are delighted to have all of you here.
Esther Levens, would you please come forward? I've worked with Esther for as long as I've been in public life on the U.S.-Israel relationship. And I don't know of a person in America that's done more for that relationship, particularly of bringing and involving Christians in a pro-Israel community than Esther Levens has done. I mean this on a national and global basis. Here is a humble woman who I've seen in numerous meetings in Washington, D.C., and she's been the organizing person. Of course, she doesn't take any credit herself, but she just really believes in the cause. Her husband helped start in that too, in that cause. And I've got a proclamation here for Vrem Levens that I would like. I don't normally like to read these, but this guy was impressive of what he did, and he was one of ours. He's a local guy. Moving on a national, international basis. Whereas Vrem Levens called Kansas home for more than 3 decades prior to his passing in 1983, was an entrepreneur who overcame challenges, including the '51 flood, which I hope we don't see repeated, Esther.
That's right.
To build a successful animal feed business in Kansas. He is a devoted father of 2 and husband, devotes his life to Kansas politics and strong public policy support for the nation of Israel, a democratic ally of the United States. Vrem Levens was a member of the Sonborn Institute, which helped prepare for an independent Israel state and worked tirelessly to give a not yet independent Israel the means to defend itself from foreign attack. Remember, Israel is launched in a day, in 48. It has armies poised on all of its borders. I believe it's 6 countries that want to kill it that day. It has to immediately be born and defend itself. And there was a group of people that had worked for years prior to that time to see that Israel would be able to defend itself. And in an amazing thing, many would call a miraculous thing, withstood that initial challenge in 1948 when if you're a betting person, you don't, the odds on this one aren't good. But they did. But there was a dedicated group of people like Vrem Levens that saw to it that they would be able to have that. Vrem Levens served on the executive committee of the American Israeli Political Action Committee, inspired his wife of 21 years, Esther Levens, to carry on his legacy by establishing Voices United for Israel, now known as Unity Coalition for Israel after his death. That was formed. The Unity Coalition brings together organizations and individuals of different faiths in support of Israel. And whereas February 6, 2011 marked the centennial of Vrem Levens' birth, now therefore I, Sam Brownback, Governor of the State of Kansas, do hereby commend the late Vrem Levens for his work on behalf of the people of Kansas, the nation of Israel, and a strong bond between the two. God bless Vrem and you.
I just want to say that nobody in the whole Senate ever, I think, was as helpful as Senator Brownback was. And we have such a wonderful governor, and this means so much to me. And coming from you especially, who understands all the issues and every facet of the foreign policy, and was never afraid to be brave and stand up and fight for it with resolutions and with bills. And I thank you for your wonderful service, and I especially thank you for this and remembering Vrem's commitment. I appreciate that from you. Thank you.
One subject of common cause between Esther Levens and Governor Brownback is the moving of the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Israel's capital city, Jerusalem. Sam Brownback, as senator, actually sponsored legislation to do just that. Here are his thoughts on the matter now.
It is completely feasible to move the embassy, the United States Embassy in Israel, to Jerusalem. And not only that, it's the responsible thing to do. It is the only place in the world where we don't have our embassy in the nation's capital, is in Israel. And I think that's a terrible statement on our part. Here's one of our closest allies in the world, and we don't have our embassy in their nation's capital. And I recognize the political nature of the issue, but we ought to also say about just the responsible nature of this issue. We can do it, we should do it. Now is the time to do it. I would urge people to contact their senator, their representative, to sign on to a bill that's coming forward to support this. It can be done. And you know, what else is, I think, important? Now that we're in this Arab Spring moment, where you're seeing now a number of Arab countries start to embrace democracy, it's time for us to do something like this, because all those countries were blaming Israel for their problems for all these years. They're saying, look, it's Israel, they're the problem, when it wasn't. It was their own governance structure that was the problem. It's their own governance structure that's a problem in Libya, in Syria. They were having the same sort of problems in Egypt. Let's be real with the people around the world and say, that's the issue. It isn't Israel. Israel deserves to be a nation, whole and free. It deserves to have its own capital, which is Jerusalem. We should have our embassy in their capital, which is where we have it everywhere else in the world, and it's in Jerusalem.